A report came out that the Blue Jays may be sellers a while ago, and another report recently came out from Mark Feinsand that Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. may be on the trade block, and we don't know what a package would look like for them. We don't know who's interested, but man, is it crazy to talk about. So we'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse with a series against the Pirates right around the corner. I decided to go to PNC Park for today's episode. They're not playing in PNC Park this year because they did that last season, but it's probably the nicest ballpark in all of baseball, and it's my favorite, so that's why we're going here today. And for some reason, this one keeps cutting off my face, so we're just going to have to bear with that. But Nick, an insane report came out. I don't know how else to describe this. Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Teams are calling for them. Apparently, the asking prices are astronomical from the Blue Jays' perspective, but they should be because Bo is 25 years old and he's had great MLB seasons already. Same thing with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. These are not young prospects that you're going to be trading for. They're established MLB stars. I wouldn't say that they're superstars, but they're established MLB stars that have had 4 seasons under their belts already. So you're going to have to pay a premium for that type of player, even though they haven't been performing as of late. Nick, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what a package would be like for these two guys. And if the Jays wanted to retool on the fly, it would have to start with these two players right here. If they wanted to improve their farm system, if they wanted to be more competitive in a couple of years' time and kind of throw away this window that we've been talking about, it starts with these two players, and I think you could get a lot back for them.
Yeah, and I'll go through the article, and it seems like maybe they won't do a full rebuild, but maybe they trade one of them and then some of their expirings to get contracts back. But before we get into it, a quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. But you mentioned it, Peter. Mark Feinsand, a bit of a bomb this morning. It's blowing up all over Jays Nation. And basically what it says is that, for one, the Jays, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bichette asks were ridiculous, and that this is an AL executive says the Jays are not opposed to moving Bo or Vladdy, and that they've already opened up their phone or have at some point this season 2 phone calls for these guys and have listened to offers, clearly, as we know, because the asks have been ridiculous. And Peter, this is surprising that they're even, I mean, really, it's not that surprising because we've been talking about it for a while, but the fact that we know it happened now is a little bit interesting. And this is the exact report. So the Blue Jays reportedly set ridiculous asking prices in trade talks for Vladdy and Bo. An MLB executive told Mark Feinsand, I don't think they're opposed to it. They've talked to teams about it. The asks are ridiculous, but I think they're going to try and retool a lot, and using those guys to get pieces may be a way to do it. Now, Peter, we're only 2.5 games out of a playoff spot. And again, this kind of depends on how close we are to a playoff spot come the trade deadlines. I think if we're within, a couple games, they probably won't do this. But I can see a very real world where maybe they trade off Bichette, get the assets for that, maybe trade off Jimmy Garcia, Yusei Kikuchi, the guys who are expiring, keep Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in the core, retool on the fly without tearing it completely down, and seeing what you can get for a guy like Bichette. And we'll get into some stuff regarding him in a minute, but I think Bichette's the more likely one personally to get traded, not based on any reports. I just think they're going to re-sign Vladdy, and I think Bo could be on the move, and we don't know to where, but we can speculate a little bit.
I don't think Bo is more likely to get moved. I don't think either of them are really likely to get moved. I'm all for this. I think that it is in the Blue Jays' best interest to go ahead and try to get assets for these guys. But at the same time, you have to evaluate those assets that you're getting back. We did a trade package just maybe a few weeks ago about the Astros and the Blue Jays being trade partners. Vladdy was going the other way to Houston, and coming back towards Toronto was Joey Loperfido, a 25-year-old prospect. Vladdy is a 25-year-old multiple-time All-Star MVP runner-up. There's a difference between those two 25-year-olds, but Loperfido was the centerpiece of the deal. He has 15 major league at-bats. So yeah, I think it is the best thing that the Blue Jays go ahead and try to trade these guys and try to retool on the fly as opposed to an all-out rebuild if you lose them in 2 years for nothing in free agency. But at the same time, you don't want to give them up for nothing, for I wouldn't say damaged goods, but for guys that are not going to be even close to their level of play when they finally do break into the major leagues. Like I like Loperfido as a player, but swapping him pretty much straight up for Vladdy, no thank you. No thank you. And the same thing for Bichette as well. Like if you're not going to get a premium high level prospect, then why even bother? Ride it out, and you probably won't go on a run in the playoffs. You might not even make the playoffs the way that you've been playing lately, but it's better than giving up a year and a half of these guys for virtually nothing, and then you're wondering why you're so bad 5 years down the line. It's like a fine line that the Blue Jays got to walk here. They got to find that happy medium between getting as much as they can at the deadline if they decide to sell, and not selling for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I just feel like Vladdy. I mean, he kind of. It's funny enough. Since we made that trade video, he's been on an absolute heater and just going off the walls. And he's probably raised his value because of recency bias for the average, like for us fans watching by a little bit. But I agree with you. The only reason why I say I think Bo is more likely to get moved. I just think if you have to choose to build around one going forward, I just feel like Vladdy is more dedicated to Toronto regarding. I'm more so talking about an extension because they're not going to let both of them walk for nothing, I'd hope. And again, you can see here Bichette avoided arbitration. We don't know exactly who is going to be traded. And Peter, I guess if you're on the side of trading both of them, that's an interesting way. I'm more so on the side of trading one and then building around the other so you don't have to completely tear it down. We've seen the Cubs linked to him months ago with Bo Bichette, and they're talking with other teams. I don't think he gets traded to the Cubs necessarily.
Yeah.
But there's been talks in the past, teams like that. When I'm trying to brainstorm teams that the Blue Jays could trade Bichette to or even Vladdy, I don't know what teams would have the package that the Jays would want, especially given this asking price. But I guess you said you disagree. I just feel like for some reason in my head, I picture a Vladdy extension more likely than a Bo extension. So then in my head, I think that maybe Bo Bichette's more likely to go if they're going to choose to trade one of them. If it's both of them, then I don't even know. It's all right in my head.
Well, I just look at it this way. Vladdy doesn't play a premium position. Bo Bichette does. And Vladdy, in the past couple of years, has been sort of middle of the pack when it comes to first baseman, where he's making $20 million a year and he's not giving you $20 million of value. I get that his average is good and his surface numbers look okay, but Christian Walker is a good example. Like this guy's super underrated and he's had better seasons than Vladdy in the past 2 years or 3 years, whatever. So like you can find production in at first base. You can find home runs and RBIs somewhere else. Maybe you'll have to give up a little bit of fielding. Maybe you'll have to give up, I don't know, some contact ability, but there are ways around like replacing a first baseman. I'm not going to say that Vladdy is replaceable because he's still a very good player in his own right, but Bo plays shortstop, and there aren't that many great shortstops in the league today. And don't get me wrong, I'm a Vladdy guy through and through. I've made that clear on this podcast multiple times, but when you're just looking at overall value position wise, I think you got to go with the shortstop. And look, I would look to trade both of them because they've proven time and time again that they're not winning core players. I think they're good complementary pieces, which is why other teams might want to go out and acquire them. But I don't know if I'd build a team around either one of them. And that's just the cold hard truth. We thought that Vladdy might be that guy. Maybe he's getting back to being that guy, but still, he's only got 4 home runs in 45 games. That's just not going to play at the big league level, not if you're an everyday first baseman.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree regarding the. I don't know if either of these guys are players that are good enough to be the best player in a championship team. Vladdy's closer in my head than Bo just because of his
I
MVP
think so
caliber
too.
season. But I don't know if he's going to get back there. Maybe there's some recency bias playing in my head because of how good he's hit as of late. But yeah, I think I agree with you on that front, and that's probably why other teams are asking for him. But I don't blame the Jays. And Peter, if there's one thing we can take out of this before we wrap up is that I'm happy that the asks were ridiculous for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette because the last thing we need
Yeah.
was for them to trade one of their stars. We were talking about Alek Manoah trading him for pennies in the dollar. Yeah, he's only pitched 2 games and he's been great this season, but I'm happy now that even just based on these 2 starts, that's probably given us more value in his 7 inning runs than we would have got for some lottery ticket prospect that people were expecting us to trade for the Reds third baseman way back. So there's a lot of different ways here. I'm happy the ask is ridiculous, and I don't know what team any of these guys will be traded to. And I want to ask you guys in the comments.
Yeah.
Again, we heard Cubs months ago. I doubt that's going to happen, but it's possible. What teams would you suspect are interested in these guys then that could give a decent package to the Jays? Let us know. But any final thoughts, Peter, before I wrap up? A wild
Yeah.
report.
That's the thing, Nick. You spoke about Manoah, and we were against trading him in
Correct.
the
Full team.
offseason, even after that horrible 2023 year that he had, because we've seen the highest of highs. And we've seen the highest of highs from Vladdy as well. Like my biggest fear is that he gets traded for a guy who's not as good as him, and then he goes to that team and he figures it out again. And he goes and hits 45 home runs and he finds that home run stroke again. Like that is my biggest fear in terms of trading Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I see the same thing with Manoah as well. Like if you want to trade for any of those guys that are young, that are not making too much money, that are not tied down for the next 10, 15 years in terms of contract, then yeah, you're going to have to pay for them at their best. You're going to have to pay for an Alek Manoah who finished third in Cy Young voting, or maybe a little bit less than that, considering the poor season and a half that he's had, or whatever you want to call it. But you're going to have to pay a premium. You're going to have to pay not for the guy that he is now, but for the guy that he was just a short time ago. Same thing with Vladdy. So yeah, keep those asking prices high with Vladdy, with Bo, with Manoah, because you're not going to get much equal value if you just sell them off for nothing. And I want them to retool. I think it's the time for them to do that, but only if it's right. Only if they get the right pieces back and if it makes sense for the team. If you get a 25-year-old prospect who is going to be an average big leaguer for Vladdy, I don't want to do that. I'd rather lose him for nothing in 2 years' time. Seriously, I'd rather lose Vladdy for nothing and watch him go to work every day as opposed to getting a 25-year-old who has a chance of being an okay big leaguer. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's funny if you look back at that trade now, and no one would even, not that we considered it at the time anyway, but Vladdy's now approaching an 800 OPS. He's hammering the ball. Can't get it in the air quite yet, but he's looking like a better player. But I don't know. This is going to be an interesting conversation to go back to because, I mean, in theory, in the next couple weeks, this is the softest stretch of the schedule for the Jays. They could be in a playoff spot, and this whole conversation doesn't really matter too much. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. I think I agree. I think if you're going to trade them, has to be a ridiculous asking price. But if you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now. We'll see you soon.